Ashley, who is attending in her pre-induction period as our new Director of People. So you're very welcome, Helen. I look forward to you formally joining the board after your step, which I think is March the 3rd. Yeah. So thank you. I have no other apologies. Declarations of interest. You have the paper. Has anything changed? Are there any new declarations pertinent, particularly to this meeting, to be declared? No, thank you. And the minutes of the last meeting held in public. We'll go through them page by page. Page 1, page 2, page 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Everyone's content with the minutes, so thank you. And then the matters arising and the action log. Elaine, where are we with this?
Thank you, Wendy. So the first action, which is to invite the Chair of Safeguarding Board to present the annual report for 2024. The report is due to be published early 2025 and later for 10 months, so we scheduled that for the next meeting in public, which is in March.
Thank you.
The second item, 7224, an update on estates risk to be presented to the February board. Following the governance review and the work we've done on the risk appetite statement, we will be doing a full refresh of the board assurance framework, and the estates risk will be addressed as part of that refresh.
Thank you. That's really helpful. In terms of the safeguarding, I think it's really helpful to hear from the Chair of the Safeguarding Board, particularly pertinent after the last Board in Public's update from your team. And I presume you'll liaise with them so that the report is pertinent to what Manx Care's responsibilities are. That would be really helpful. Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Anything else, Elaine?
The following two actions are both scheduled for the next meeting.
Thank you. Just so that members of the public are aware, we're relatively new to the board assurance framework approach to governance, and this is where our action plan will start to sit and reflect the BAF as we move forward. Our committees will start to reflect their BAF responsibilities and work with their reports. It's a big step change in our governance that I think will be very positive. So thank you, Elaine, for highlighting that. I've had no notification of any other business. Just checking there was nothing urgent to be added in. No, okay, thank you. So we'll move on to the substantive items. I'm really delighted to hear about the role of the matron. I'm a clinician. It's a hugely important relationship role, not just for patients and the public, but also for staff. So I'll hand over to Sheila to introduce this. This is the first time we've actually seen sight of our matrons. So it's a very new step change in how we structure our clinical care, our clinical leadership, and our improvement around quality of care. So thanks, Sheila.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members of the public, because as Wendy has said, this is a really, really important role for within the organisation. Our matrons are our true leadership in terms of ensuring that we provide the best standards of care we can possibly give. So without further ado, I'm going to ask our senior matrons to come to the front and come and introduce yourselves. I'd stand up so everyone can see you. That's okay.
Okay, thank you. It's a great privilege to be here to talk about the role of the matron and how we intend to introduce this into Manx Care. I'm Cathy Quine. I'm Associate Director of Nursing and the acute settings.
Hi, I'm Emma Cleater, Associate Director of Nursing. I work in integrated primary and community care.
I'm Megan Bagley. I'm Head of Midwifery.
And I'm Mark Butler. I'm an Interim Associate Director of Nursing for Mental Health.
So why are we bringing back the role of the matron? I said bringing back, we've never really established the role of the matron in the Isle of Man. As some of you have known, we've worked in the UK. In Tony Blair's days, you had to bring back the matron, the modern matron then, and that was because of those concerns of public concerns of poor standards of care. Infection rates were going up, so they had a public cry to bring back the matron. So it's something we feel really passionate about here as to why we should do that on the Isle of Man. We know from research and we know from what patients tell us what patients want. They want us to keep them safe. Don't harm me. Don't give me a pressure sore. Don't give me an infection. Keep me informed. Keep me updated. Tell me what's going on. Don't keep me waiting. And that doesn't mean waiting for an operation. That means don't keep me waiting for pain relief. Don't keep me waiting to go on the toilet. We know these are the things that patients want. 85, and probably about 75, 80% of activity that occurs in healthcare settings is delivered by nurses. So it's actually well within our gift to get it right. And the matron is pivotal to that. The matron is the cornerstone of providing good quality fundamentals of care, providing direction, leadership and quality assurance, and having that highly visible, accessible leader and authority person who the patients know, the relatives know, the carers know, and the staff know who to go to for advice, direction and support. And when things go wrong, there is someone there with authority, accountability and responsibility who can put things right. And so that's why we feel we are really passionate to bring back the role of the matron. Okay, I'll hand you on to Emma, who can tell you what that looks like in a community setting.
So in the community, obviously, we'd be concerned about visibility because that matron needs to be visible both to our teams, our district nursing teams, our community teams, the specialist areas, and that's about relocating our senior nurses out into the team so they become part of the teams in the various localities. They become that person that's that leader that our teams go to for support, that understanding the challenges in the community, that keeping on top of those, any concerns, any queries. You know, we already know that patients like to know that there's senior leaders around. They like to have conversations. They like to know that there's, you know, if the district nurses are seeing a patient or overhears conversation, they can become involved in that. They can give advice. They can give support. That responsiveness to those patients that are their challenges with it, complex, liaising with the GP practices, understanding that whole of that primary community team, and that the fundamentals of good leaderships and knowing what good looks like. So we'll be able to move our senior nurses around the island into the various teams, and that it's what our senior nurses want. They want to be involved. They want to hear what's going on in the teams every day, and that easily become a reality quite shortly.
Shall I go next? Okay, so integrated mental health services is a little different because we're part of the mental health and social care. So at the moment, we're just focusing on mental health, but I'd like to involve social care in the future. We have senior nurses, but also we have quite a lot of allied health professionals as well working with us. So initially we will focus on senior nursing roles as matrons, but I would like to think also that there's a future where other allied health professionals are involved in that. And actually, you know, a lot of our senior nurses are very much doing exactly what we're already describing in the matron role. This is more about being more visible leadership that is very much focused on clinical leadership. The impression sometimes is that senior nursing staff are in an office doing general management, and that's very much not the case, but it does clarify the expectation for the public, for the people that we work with, that we're there as visible leaders. But certainly for the role that I'm currently working in, that would be definitely a need to refocus away from the general management to the clinical leadership, to making sure that we're ensuring quality, making sure that our staff are trained and developed appropriately, and really kind of making a clear refocusing on what we want to do from a clinical perspective. Largely cost neutral, because we've got people doing these kind of roles anyway, but we'll say, okay, my focus today is purely on this clinical visibility and leadership. So, yeah, it's going to be an interesting time working towards it.
So maternity services are really behind this initiative, and we're just happy that we can align with our nursing colleagues and bring midwifery in to have a midwifery matron. The role is key to ensure that we're bringing everything back to basics and that we help get us right. The RCM have backed it for many, many years, and it's been, midwifery matron has been across the UK and other trusts for a long, long time. So I think it's right that we bring it into fruition here as well. The word matron, we all know, has positive connotations. It means and suggests respect and confidence, and that's what we want within our workforce. We know that we use acronyms, don't we? A lot in healthcare, and I've come up with one that I think would benefit from maternity services, really. So, midwifery matron would be M. A would be accountable. We want them to be accountable professional standards, delivering high quality care and learning from experience. Transformation, who'd work alongside myself at a strategic level to develop and sustain a patient-centred focus. Role modelling, incredibly important, and they should be credible in their approach and lead by example and offer guidance and support when necessary to staff. And operational oversight, ensuring safe practice through staffing, ensuring the adequate skill mix and adapting delivery of services accordingly. And finally, nurturing, which is mega important, staff by developing exceptional skill set to ensure that we've got the right training and people in the positions they should be. And this, obviously, over everything, will affect the relationships that we have with our women and the experience they have through our service.
So I think you can see that by having a matron in the ward areas, in the community, in midwifery, in mental health, will ensure that we can achieve those high standards of fundamental care. Any questions?
Just anything else you want to say to shape this, but that was really impressive. Thank you.
And thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I'm absolutely delighted that this day has come. The matrons have arrived, as far as I'm concerned. And boy, can you see them coming? But on a really serious note, the passion in the team over the last 6 months to be able to get here and to be able to talk about what are we doing? And Mark alluded to it, spending too much time in front of these things and not being visible, too much time maybe doing other roles that they shouldn't be focusing on. And with the efforts and the relationships with others across Manx Care, everybody's decided it's fit and proper to free up our matrons to support our members of the public, to support our patients and to support the communities on the Isle of Man. They play a pivotal role and they're going to get some very specific training, which has already started with one of our non-executive directors, Deputy Chair Sarah Pinch, in terms of communication. And that's really important that they can go on the radio and talk about their roles. They can talk about specific areas of nursing, because patients have told us that's what they want. That's what they want to hear about. Patients have said, because I'm watching social media, bring back the matron. And we're hearing that loud and clear. This is really serious work. This is really, really important. So I'm delighted. Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
And could I just ask you just to make a comment about how this has been costed? So we're not adding a layer of management in, because I think that was what the board was really clear about last time. So could you just comment on that?
Absolutely. Between myself and Marina and Oliver, when we've been looking at restructures within the organisation, and it is absolutely cost neutral. It is about just freeing people's time up to care and having that brave ability to say, stop doing certain things to focus on other things. So collectively, we've been able to do that cost neutrally, Chair.
I'll open this up to comments or queries. Charlie.
Thank you. I'm delighted to see you, and I think it was yourself, Kathy, I might have walked past in the corridor this
Oh, right,
morning, and
okay.
my internal reaction was, oh, a matron. Oh, it's a matron. Oh, okay. So yes, thank you very much for that. What I perceive in the matron role, and it's absolutely crucial to improve patient experience, and you will do that directly yourselves. But I also perceive like an indirect benefit or improvement to patients through your alignment with and complementing the role of the clinical directors under the new care group structure. So yeah, how do you see, or give me some insight into how the matron complements, boosts, enhances the role of the clinical director, which in turn improves patient experience in care?
Okay, I think really it's working hand in hand, isn't it? And I think you're absolutely right, that clinical input is needed, especially if there's any concerns or complaints. And we often know before it arrives, we often know we're probably going to get a complaint, and it's about being in there early days. And sometimes when a patient or a relative have concerns, it could be about the clinical care. So I think it's about, you know, owning that jointly responsibly. So it's not just always nursing issues that are the problem, it's alongside that clinical care as well. And I think forming those really good relationships with the clinicians. And I think a lot of us already have those relationships. We already probably work in that triumvirate.
I was going to use the word
Yeah.
triumvirate.
So we already work in that system of having that triumvirate, and the triumvirate sort of makes the decision making there for that care group. So we're used to that. We are well used to that. So I think it's just building on that, really, and it'll just strengthen that.
I think it will absolutely strengthen
Yeah.
across all care groups, the triangle
Yes,
of visible leadership has
definitely.
major benefits and
I think
impact.
it's very important,
Yeah.
open lines of communication amongst all of us.
Absolutely.
I think it gives it recognition as well to the patients and the family members. And I think just a little thing like the chair said is about is the cost neutral bit. Is at the moment we have senior nurses in post, and on the Isle of Man we never brought the matron role in like they did in the UK, and the modern matron, it never became established here. But what we did have is senior nurses. But what that led to, and what it still leads to now, is a confusion. Staff don't really know what that means. Patients don't know what that means. What is the role of a senior nurse? But everyone does know what the role of a matron is. So I think that will all help there as well. It'll give it clarity.
Tim and Nigel.
Thank you, Chair. Really good to see you and really welcome this renewed initiative. And really, really important as an outward and visible sign of some of the things that we do already, but building on that. And you mentioned infection control and patient experience. Infection control is one of those things one never stops, and we have never get to a point where we've said we've done that. It's something that is continuous, and that's a really key role, and as you say, in terms of patient experience as well. I'm particularly interested in the role in mental health and learning disability, and thinking about the role in terms of physical health for people who have a mental health issue or a learning disability, because we know physical health outcomes for those people are far worse than the general population. And it just strikes me there that there may be some role in terms of that. And also, you mentioned adult social care, and thinking about the role in terms of residential care in particular, and supporting nursing staff who are in care homes and other staff in terms of their role. So I think it's a really great initiative, and I think there's as always lots more that can be done in lots more areas, and be really glad to hear in the future about how you've done what you've been set up to do, but also the areas that you think also need your attention as well. Thank you.
Thank you, that's very helpful. Nigel.
Thanks, Wendy. Thank you, guys. Lovely to hear your presentation. We spend a lot of time talking about money around this table, which is right and proper, and there's a lot of tension around that subject at the moment, which is of sort of national import, really. But I think one of the problems is that it distracts from all the good stuff that's going on in the organisation. And I'm very interested in how you feel about how your discussions have gone in leading up to the introduction of the matron, and will you feel, and do you feel sufficiently empowered as matrons, as leaders, to celebrate the good stuff, share the good stuff, dump the stupid stuff the time wasting stuff. And sometimes I feel the organisation works against you because the only word that is going to be consistent from now on is going to be the right kind of change. And sometimes the organisation can work against you from making the right kind of change quickly, intuitively. And do you feel that in the creation of this role, you will be properly empowered to make the right kind of change?
Yeah, should I start? I think, you know, we must never ever lose sight of what is really important to patients. And patients do not measure us on a technical ability to do a complicated healthcare task. They don't. They measure us on the fundamentals of care. You know, be kind, compassion, and that's what patients do measure us on. So although we talk about finance, and that which obviously is very, very important, it's about reminding staff what is important to patients, and that's being treated with kindness and compassion. You know, I already said, don't harm me. You know, keep me safe. That's what patients want. We know that. We know from when we talk to patients what they want. So I know we hear all the noise around the finance, and it's very, very important, and that's what you sit around here and talk. But on the wards and in the clinical areas, and certainly, you know, in the community, maternity, mental health, patients just want to feel safe and not harmed. And we've got a responsibility to remind the ward staff of the fundamentals of what they are there for. And there are measures, there will be measures of success to how the role is and how it's successful. And what those measures of success are, there are tangible measures of success, and those are your clinical indicators. So that'll be looking at like your infection rates, your less falls, pressure sores, and also like staffing indicators. That would be your sort of less sickness and absence, appraisal rates, you know, those staff wellbeing monitors and measures that we can put in place. So those in a way don't cost a great deal. It's just how we expect to be treated and how we can treat our staff with kindness and compassion to ensure that they then care for patients with kindness and compassion.
Well said. What I will say, in addition to that, certainly in mental health, and I think in most areas, every operational manager of any of our teams is already a registrant of some kind, typically a nurse, a social worker, an occupational therapist, etc. So they go into the job as a senior clinician and actually working alongside them to promote clinical improvement, you know, staff well-being, best practice for patients is actually no bother. We don't have a problem working with people to do that because that's the background they come from anyway. It's just they're having to balance that with managing the budget and, you know, HR and staff issues and such like. So, yeah, it shouldn't be a problem.
Really think if we get the fundamentals right, the back basics things, everything else falls into place for individual, you know, experience, you know. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Really great to see you. Can't really miss you, I have to say, I read. But I hope that we'll have a regular dialogue with you as the board develops and as your role develops. But thank you very much and very good luck in all of your hard work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I think, Maria, you're next in terms of the verbal update on the mortality review roles and responsibility. Or have we got Dr. Headley here?
We have
Oh, right.
Dr.
We've got
Headley.
that side. Okay, sorry.
So it's my pleasure to introduce one of our medical examiners. Unfortunately, our other medical examiner is unwell at the present time, but Dr. Dave Headley is our Associate Medical Director for the medical examiner role, and I would like to ask him to come to the front and give us a synopsis of what they did and what they've done. They do.
Right, thanks Marina, and thank you for the invite. Where do you want me to?
If you look there, the camera will work. Bizarrely, it works around us.
So I've got a presentation
That's
as well.
perfect.
Hopefully you've got So So, yeah, my name's Dave Headley. I've been a doctor here at Nobles for about 25 years now. And I've been one of the two medical examiners for the last roughly 2.5 years. And yeah, thank you for inviting me to give a presentation of what we've been up to for the last 2.5 years, where we're going, and what the future may look like. Okay. So before I start, I've got a little presentation here. I'd just like to give you a little bit of background into what medical examiners actually are. Because when I first went for an interview for this post, I didn't really have much of a clue what a medical examiner was either, and not many of my colleagues, if any, did. So where this came from. This lovely chap, Dr. Shipman, was a very friendly GP, very popular, very nice, but he was also a very prolific serial killer. And in the year 2000, he was convicted of multiple murders, and he probably has done a lot more than that, but we'll never know. And at that time, the government of the UK decided that, could this happen again? It could well happen again. We need to have an inquiry. We need to look into this, and we need to take measures to try and prevent this happening. So there was the Shipman Inquiry Report, which went on for a number of years and was finally published in 2003. But at the same time, the UK government looked into the actual coronial system and what was going on with coroners. And that was a civil servant called Tom Luce, who eventually started working together with Dame Janet Smith, and they came up with a number of reports and recommendations. Now, this wasn't the first time this has been looked into. The coronial system has been going on for a very long time, and I don't think it had changed much since back in the Victorian times. So it was long overdue an overhaul, and that was the basis of the recommendations, was that the coronial system is not fit for purpose anymore. Things need to change, and they came up with a load of recommendations to the point where they basically came up with a bill which passed through Parliament. But there's a recurrent theme going on, because I'm sure you've all heard of the Mid Staffordshire inquiry, which was as late as 2013. There's been a number of other problems as well, where issues have come up, and everyone has said basically the common theme is that the coronial system and the death registration system are not fit for purpose, and things need to change. So if we can go on to the next slide. The Coroners and Justice Act was the outcome of all these inquiries at the very start, and that basically laid the foundations for changing the death certification programme and to introduce medical examiners in the first instance. Now, if you look at the dates on here, it wasn't until 2019, which is 10 years later, that this Act of Parliament actually started making some movements there. And the medical examiners began in 2019, but it was done initially on a voluntary basis, so it wasn't statutory. Initially, there were lots of trials set up, different types of paperwork, different thinking, what should happen and stuff, and it all came together quite nicely. And it was only September last year where in the UK this became statutory, and medical examiners are required to examine the notes of every deceased person in the whole of the UK. By UK, I mean England and Wales. Scotland's obviously got different laws and stuff. So we go on to the next slide. Now, purpose of the medical examiner. I think of this as threefold. There are three main reasons for a medical examiner. Obviously, the one that most people are concerned about is that we don't want Dr. Shipman to come back and start killing people again. But death certificates, well, the death certificate is a very, very important piece of information, because what happens in the UK is that the Office of National Statistics receive all death certificates of everyone that has died, and they code that information, and they produce statistic documents, and they send them to basically public health departments, where that information is used for funding and things like if an epidemic were to break out like COVID, or if a number of deaths in certain areas may need more resources to try and prevent that happening or whatever. So the death certificate is not just a certificate, it's also very important information for the public. So it needs to be accurate. And I think we all know from past experience that they're not always as accurate as they could be. And sometimes it's just easier to write something simple than it is to actually think about what's going on there. So that was the first thing. The bereaved. Now we know when you're bereaved, you can get very emotional and upset. And often bereaved people just want to be heard, just want to be listened to, or maybe just ask simple questions as well. So the medical examiner system gives this because it makes it mandatory for medical examiners to ring the next of kin or whoever's reported the death to speak to them and to make sure that they are happy with the process and they've got no questions to ask. Because often a lot of the complaints we get when someone has died or because the next of kin are upset because they don't actually understand what's been written on the death certificate, or they don't understand the process or whatever. And sometimes all they need is to speak to someone who understands what's going on and can explain that in layman's terms. And that often will stop that happening there and then. And we know from experience of the medical examiner system in the UK that the public are actually very happy and reassured that they've been spoken to and that's happened. And one of the things that has to happen in the UK now is that when a death is registered, the registrar of deaths will speak to the next of kin and make sure that they sign that they have spoken to a medical examiner or someone from the medical examiner's office as well. And then finally, it's a really good opportunity to pick up where things may be going wrong. So as a medical examiner, I get to see what's happened. I scrutinise the notes, and there may be a theme that comes up. So it may be a specific doctor, it may be a specific department, there may be something going on somewhere that I get the first look at, and I can address that and highlight that and try and do something about that to prevent it happening, and ideally stop another shipment happening. We also get to see sometimes the coroner takes referrals on deaths that fall under certain problems, such as has there been something suspicious going on there, or do we actually know the cause of death, whatever. We can pick up where that patient has not been referred to the coroner in that situation. So we can advise the person writing the death certificate that they actually need to. This is a statutory thing as well. So we can go on to the next slide. What is a medical examiner? So in the UK now, there are a number of medical examiners have been employed. They are all experienced doctors, they're not junior doctors at all. They've all undergone formal mandatory training, which myself and Dr. Hoole have done as well. That was set up by the Academy of Royal Colleges. There's an online learning part which we have to complete, and then there's a face-to-face bit where we go to the Royal College pathologists and spend a day there going through various scenarios and things like that. So everyone has to do that before they can actually start work. Now, in the UK, the law made it that the NHS is responsible for medical examiners, not the government, not anything else. It's the NHS. They employ, they pay salaries, etc. The medical examiner is meant to be independent at the same time, which at the very start, people were concerned, saying, well, if you're employed by this NHS department, then how can you be seen as independent? But if you think about it, you don't have to work at the same hospital trust that you're employed by. So you could be employed by the trust here, but you work somewhere else and you look at the deaths there. In Wales, they have a national medical examiner system. So they have a central medical examiner's office and they cover the whole of Wales and do all the reviews, etc. there as well. So we are independent, I feel, just because you get paid your salary through there, it's come from the same public purse at the end of the day. So I think that we are truly independent. On the next slide, please. Right. So we do something called scrutiny. So what we will do as a medical examiner is go through the deceased's notes, records, etc. And we will perform proportionate scrutiny. That means what's in proportion to this death in particular. So that may be very, very simple, just reading through the medical notes and picking up things, and it may be very simple to say that there are no suspicious circumstances here, and I'm happy to sign this off. It may be quite complex and it could take a long time. We reckon on average it's about half an hour per patient, per deceased, but that will differ depending on the circumstances there. We also speak to the bereaved. Well, say we in the UK, they will speak to the bereaved. That's mandatory. Doesn't have to be the actual medical examiner. It can be someone from the medical examiner's office who's been delegated, but that will always happen. We can speak to the QAP, which is the qualified attending practitioner, who is the person who actually fills out the death certificate. That may be usually a very junior doctor as part of the team, but it can be the consultant as well. But we can speak to them if we're not happy with the cause of death that's been listed or something else that's going on there. This is the important thing. What happens now in the UK is if you want to register a death, the death certification process has all changed completely. They have new death certificates, and at the bottom there is a line that the medical examiner has to sign off before the registrar can register this death. And that's the big thing that's changed. So that stops your likes of Shipman, who used to write his own death certificates and just hand them in, no problems there, because they all have to be scrutinised by a medical examiner before that death can be registered. And that is probably one of the biggest changes there. So if we can move on, yeah. So let's look at the situation now on the Isle of Man. So there are two of us at the moment doing this, and we each spend maybe half a day a week, sometimes a bit more in winter, for example, in summer, maybe a bit less, but we spend that time in the mortuary. We have a really good working relationship with the mortuary staff there. They are absolutely fantastic. They've taken to us like a duck to water, and we feel very reassured that we've got those backups there as well. We now scrutinise every single death that occurs within Nobles Hospital. There are exceptions. So if a death has already been referred to the coroner and the coroner decides that that needs to go for a further inquest, then the coroner takes over jurisdiction. Because they're already looking into everything, we stand back. We don't get involved in these at all. So these are only deaths where the coroner has decided there is no need for an inquest. Now, we refer a lot of deaths to the coroner. A lot of the time, the coroner sends them back and says, I'm happy with your proposed cause of death. We don't need to investigate this further. That happens. As medical examiners, we will scrutinise all the notes and records and just make sure. And we have had instances where the coroner has said, that's fine, you carry on. We've looked at it and gone, hang on a minute. The coroner has not been given the right information, or there's bits missing, and we've sent it back to the coroner to say, we're not happy with this. Can you look into this further? As well. So that's another role that we play there as well. At this moment in time, I've highlighted Ramsey in red there. We do not cover Ramsey, the hospice, Manannan Court, care homes or anything in the community on the Isle of Man at the minute. That's not the same as in the UK. Okay, I've put Ramsey in red because Ramsey's slightly different. They do have their own mortuary there, but it's not staffed. The resources are not the same. And we put forward a business proposal to actually merge Ramsey with our mortuary here, so that the deceased are brought down and kept here, and then we can have their notes and look through things as well. We've started doing that as a sort of a trial at the moment. It's very difficult because we don't have notes to look to, so it is going to take a bit of time, but that's for the future. We would like to extend it to everywhere on the whole island. That's one of our future plans. We can provide advice to certifying doctors, and certainly had a few phone calls from various staff members saying, what do you think about this? Do you think this needs to go to the coroner? Do you think this is a suitable cause of death, etc.? And we provide that advice freely. We can make a direct referral to the coroner. It's not ideal. We shouldn't have to do that. The doctor themselves should be referring because that's their statutory duty. But if an argument were to happen, we can overrule that and we can just go directly to the coroner and speak to them directly. But ideally, it should be the certifying doctor who does that as well. I think we're in the next slide. when the whole thing was set up, as I said before, it was very new. It was a very steep learning curve, and nobody really understood what a medical examiner was and did and stuff. So when we were first established, we were given kind of a very loose kind of job plan description, etc. One of the rules was to set up a mortality review group. That's something that we did used to have many, many years ago, and it was working reasonably well. It was more informal, but when COVID came along, like most things, it just fell apart and never happened again. So the first thing was that we had to set up a mortality review group, and that was a lot more difficult than it sounds. And we had to get buy-in from various people. And I think we finally got to a reasonable level where, remember before I said we had to be independent from the NHS? And one of the strict rules there is that the medical examiner shouldn't be involved in the hospital mortality review group. So being chair of that group and independent was impossible. So finally, we've got to the point where we've now managed to stand back and we've appointed a chair. So now we can remain truly independent. We do turn up to the review group and we do partake, we can give information, etc., but we are separate and we stand back. The other thing that we were asked to do, was to, there was in 22, the hospital mortality policy was introduced, and that basically mandated that every person dying in Nobles Hospital should have what's called a level 1 review. I do have some of those here that I can hand around if you want to see what one looks like. That's the brand. But basically, the level 1 review, I like to think of it as a notification form. It's basically a letter saying to me, I've had a death log ward 8 and can you investigate further? But it allows whoever is doing the death certification process the opportunity to highlight any issues that have been with that patient on the ward, write the death certificate so we can see what it is, and to say whether or not they want a further review as well. So a level 2 review is a much more in-depth review that either anyone can ask for, but it's usually going to be the team looking after the patient. But as medical examiners, we will also recommend where we think further review is necessary, and we can hand that round. And that's done online at the moment. We also, so when we started, level 1 reviews just weren't being done at all. It was about 5% of patients would get a level 1 review. And initially we tried to address that by handing all the pre-existing level 1 reviews that hadn't been done out to everyone. And the feedback was like, we're not interested, we're not doing this. So very, very simply what we did was said, right, okay, that's fine. We're going to make it mandatory that when you fill in a death certificate in the mortuary, you also fill in a level 1 review, and the staff in the mortuary backed us up 100%. And within a matter of weeks, we had 100%. Everyone was getting level 1 reviews, so that worked really well. So yeah. We used to have someone called Darren Fitzpatrick that worked in the audit department, and he joined us when we were setting up the mortality group.
Okay.
And he was just absolutely amazing with graphs and charts and things. And he used to produce statistics, which I think you've probably seen before in the board. And they were absolutely great. Unfortunately, Darren has moved on to pastures new, and I'm hoping someone is going to be doing that in the future, but we'll see. But I think they were really good. And then finally, I put this down as future aspirations, but this is kind of my personal opinion of where we need to move to in the future, if you like. So in an ideal world, the Attorney General Office would come up with something very, very similar to the Coroner and Justice Act that they've got in the UK, and we could just follow suit. We've been in touch with the Attorney General's office, and the appetite for that is not brilliant at the minute. Even the Coroner is dead keen for this to happen, and he's on board with us. And he's tried speaking to them, and it's going to take, I think, a big drive from Manx Care maybe to to try and help this happen. But at the minute, death certificates are being written by doctors and they're being submitted before the medical examiners have a chance to review them. And that's led to some problems with really bad death certification, with causes of death not being there and stuff. And we could stop all that. I think straight away we could introduce a Manx policy saying that, similar to the level 1 forms, that the death certificate cannot be released to the registrar until one of the medical examiners has cast their eyes over it. And if necessary, it needs to be revised before that can be sent away. And I think that could be done straight away and that would solve that problem straight away. Cremation forms in the UK, cremation forms have disappeared because now everyone's getting scrutinised by a medical examiner. There's no need for those anymore. Back in the olden days, you had 2 parts there that needed to be signed off by a doctor. Shipman got away with this because he just picked his friends off, I hear on the grapevine. And they would just go, oh yes, Dr. Shipman, he's lovely, I'll sign that for him without speaking to him or everything. We could get away with all of that. The fees in the UK that used to be paid for cremation forms are now going straight to the medical examiner's office, and that's how the medical examiners are being paid. So it's basically cost neutral. A lot of junior doctors, that's their pocket money. They're probably not very happy that they've lost that, but hey. I also think that we should be speaking to the next of kin as well here. I think we can adopt a lot of complaints or potential complaints just by having a quiet word with the next of kin and answering their questions that they may or may not have. And I think that would be very, very helpful. So that's something else I think could be introduced very much straight away here. I also think that in the future, we need to move to a system like the UK where every single death that's not being looked into by the coroner is reviewed by a medical examiner. So that would go out to all care homes, the community, Manannan Court, etc., the hospice. And I think we can do, that's going to take a lot of work, basically. That's going to take more resources than we've got at the minute. But we certainly can start in small pieces, I think. And overall, that would improve the quality of the death certificate. I found this out only recently that we don't have the Office of National Statistics on the Isle of Man. So who does that role on the Isle of Man? Believe it or not, it's Department for Enterprise. I just found that out. Who would know? And they submit all the data to the Public Health Board as well, I think. And that's the end of my talk. Slide. So has anyone got any questions? Anything I can help with?
Briefly, thank you, Oliver.
Thank you. I think this is really important, and I think it's going to give people at the Isle of Man, additional assurance and reassurance about the care that they receive. One thing that comes to my mind, when sometimes bereaved relatives will be upset and perhaps even complain if they feel that the paperwork associated with their loved one's death has caused delays to them going through funerals. And certainly for some cultures, that's very important to get funerals done very quickly. So are you able to say, in terms of the time period for getting this additional layer of scrutiny done, is there a big delay, or is it made much difference?
Well, because that system's not in place on the Isle of Man at the moment, it's not made any difference at all yet. There have been a lot of stuff recently in the UK about delays, but if you look into those, they tend to be coroner's cases where the coroner has jurisdiction, and it's not actually anything to do with the medical examiner system at all. Would it cause problems over here? We do have a small kind of Muslim community and other denominations that require deaths to be expedited, but that's no different than it is now. So if a death happened on a Friday night, you're still not going to get anything done until Monday anyway. So the medical examiner wouldn't delay that necessarily. So that shouldn't be a problem. In fact, if anything, it may even speed things up.
Tim?
So thank you very much for the presentation. And this is a major, I think we should acknowledge this is a major step forward for Manx Care. When I started to chair the Quality and Safety Engagement Committee a few years ago, this was really something which was not being done. And I think that we have to say it's absolutely right for our patients here at Nobles, but also all our patients, that if they do die, that we have a system in place of checks and balances. And I just want to commend the huge amount of work that you and your colleagues have done to get us to this point. We are in a very different place than we were a number of years ago. And I think the whole of the community on the Isle of Man can take comfort from that and to know that we have those checks and balances in place. So really just to acknowledge that and say we've made a lot of progress, as you pointed out, vocalising on the good things that have happened as well. I think you're absolutely right in terms of needing to widen the process, and that I guess does in some part rely on legislation, but also some part on the government wishing to mandate or commission that service. So I'm not sure, Chair, how far that mandate and how far that goes in terms of whether we're paid to provide that just for Nobles, or whether we actually receive funding to do that across the piece or not. So that's just an open question. We also, of course, do have contracting arrangements and relationships with GPs and with other community services as Manx Care, so are different from the UK, and that should be easier in a way than it is on the UK. I think also to say in terms of the care homes, etc. And the other particular interest, which I've highlighted over the years, is the connection to the learning disability leader reviews and making sure that those are undertaken within the same kind of framework as they are within England. And as we mentioned already once this afternoon, we know that outcomes for people with a learning disability are not as good, and they have earlier deaths than people without a learning disability. So really important that we focus on that and learn where we can learn from that. But my basic message is thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Dr. Headley. I think we'll have a conversation, but I think we probably need to start developing a strategic plan for the future of this service. Because without that, we then can't develop the business plans and the links with the general, etc. So we've got some levers that we certainly need to pull, but this is a really great start. We certainly need to get the data, because that's what will drive a significant change. So we'll make sure we get some support around that. But thank you, really helpful to hear this from you. And can you thank your colleague as well for all the work that goes on to coming today? Excellent. So we will move on. You're welcome to stay if you wish, or not. We're not against you. Board insurance framework, Elaine. There's a paper in here.
So the board assurance framework is included in the code for completeness. There's been two risks that have been updated during the reporting period. The first one, risk 1A, failure to maintain health. The changes are highlighted in red in your pack, so you can see the changes that have been made, but there have been no changes to the overall risk rating during the period. The second one that's been updated is risk 1B, and that's the failure to provide social care. There's been a new control added in that. You can see that in the papers, that all the updates that have been highlighted in green. Apart from that, there's been no change to the overall risk score. And as I said previously, we will be, from the 1st of April, we will be introducing a new board assurance framework following the work that's been done on our risk appetite and the governance review.
Any points from the execs in particular? Tim?
This now I'll have 2 points, so I was making a point my fault completely, so Tim made my point twice, but thank you. Very quickly, some good work between myself and Sheila in terms of synergy on the OCQD work, so that's progressing well, just to highlight that in the notes. Some really great work with Pete and Sean on the debt recovery piece, which is important to us, and we're still working our way on that, certainly impact on the budget. And then ongoing discussions with offering to infrastructure and the bodies in relation to React the Bay, the opportunity to fly rider, feedback on the board on that in due course.
So thank you. So as we develop our maturity around understanding of board assurance framework, we will do deep dives into various sections of it. The committees will start to reflect that in their exceptional reporting as well. So thank you, Elaine. This is I know it's a huge amount of work and it's quite wordy and quite unwieldy at the moment, but it will start to give us a sort of barometer of where we are in terms of our risk appetite and the assurance that the board needs. That. And Tim, very briefly.
Very briefly, again, just to commend Sheila and Tim for their work on this. It's been something that QSE has been looking at and asking for some time. And really good to see the changes that's been made, even though they're going to be superseded. But it's really from a solid baseline. So congratulations to you both.
There's a lot of stuff underpins, if you're right to make that point. Thank you. So my report, I've had a number of meetings around the mandate and operating plan discussions, ranging from internal meetings through to meetings with the Minister and Department of Health. I attended a TIML briefing that Sean led on to brief members of TIML on the forecast overspend. And I think we had a really good and interesting dialogue with some interesting questions. And clearly the engagement around TIML members that the exec have been leading on is beginning to pay dividends in terms of the sort of rolling conversation that we're able to have with them. And I'd just like to say thank you to Sean for leading on that meeting. I've also met with our incoming medical director, Chris, who's starting also in March. So that was a very useful first meeting. Our focus at that meeting was around the GIRF programme, getting it right first time programme. And I'm pleased to say he's a real enthusiast and has done a considerable amount of work in that space. So that fits into our quality improvement aspirations. I also attended a meeting around patient safety in Birmingham, which was hearing about where boards sit on patient safety. And for some time now, and in discussion with our colleagues in governance review and with Sheila and Marina, I've been minded that the board needs to show a clearer face in patient safety. And I'm delighted to say that Sandra Caldwell has agreed to be our patient safety champion non-executive. This is a new role. It will need to be shaped to work for us. There are some descriptors in NHS England and around the space that people are working in, but I think we have an opportunity to really think through what we want from that role and how it will support not just the execs, but the process of where we are with structures to support patient safety reporting, but also how will that improve patient outcomes. And I'm very grateful to Sandra. It's not just because she's unable to attend this meeting that she's taken on this role. I spent some time with the governance review team. The board tomorrow will look at this in detail and we will be bringing the formal outcomes from that to your board in public in due course. And then finally, I just want to thank Marina, because I think this is your last board in public in your interim medical director role. So thank you for all the work that you've done. Thank you for being generous with your time and explaining systems to me when I arrived. I'm delighted you're not leaving the organisation. You'll be going back to your true passion, your specialty background. But I think the board would like to express its thanks to you formally. And we look forward to seeing you in other roles in the future. Teresa's formal report.
Yes, thank you. So as ever, my report is supported by an Horizon scan. I'm not going to cover all the points in detail. I just want to pull out a few key points. But I would like to give Sean Stacey the opportunity to just give the board a very high level summary of where we've got to with the operating plan. Obviously, we're in the midst of winter and it's an incredibly busy time for the organisation. The report highlights that we have seen very high levels of flu and respiratory illness, mirroring what's been seen in England, which has really presented some operational challenges for the organisation. So we'd like to take the opportunity to really express our huge thanks to all of the staff who continue to work so hard to support all of our patients and service users during this very busy time of year. In response to some of those operational challenges, it is usual for organisations to look at how we optimise flow during those periods of time. So during the middle of January, led by Sean Stacey, one of our improvement directors, we ran a multi-agency discharge event, which was a 2-week intense period where we really sought to optimise flow through the hospital and look at our systems and processes and look where we can make improvements. As a critical time of the year where we are really wanting to plan what services look like and how we configure and what needs to be done in preparation for our new financial year. The other bit I just wanted to express in the report was really pleased that the long-standing pay dispute with the British Medical Association, which represents a large number of our doctors and dentists, has now been settled, and the details are in the paper. This was achieved through the support from the Department of Health and Social Care. As Manx Care has always been clear, we had a finite budget from which we were able to negotiate our pay settlements for all of our staff. But obviously the additional support provided by the DHSC has enabled us to achieve settlement. And there's an awful lot of work now to do to look at the other aspects of our contracts with our doctors, but good to have got that pay settlement resolved. And for our more junior doctors, our resident doctors, for their salaries to be comparable with the UK equivalent. I think I also just wanted to provide first an apology to the public, but also some assurance. So the board will recall that in January we took some additional difficult actions in order to improve our financial position and stay within the control total that we had been established, which did mean we took some difficult decisions around reducing activity during February and March. I'm pleased to say that we are able to restart that work that had been planned to be reduced on Ireland, and all of our clinics are now back in place. And the majority of our operating lists have been reinstated. There's just one specialty, which is just will be reinstated from March. So that is good news. And I'd just like to apologise for the public for the disruption that caused. And we accept it's a very anxious time, but it was a very necessary action. And as I say, the MCAL service is available if people have any queries. So I'd like to move on to the operating plan now and just give Sean the opportunity to just outline where we are with that piece of work. The premise to this is we started a piece of work back in October where we really sought to work very closely with the Department of Health and Social Care to produce an operating plan for 25-26, which was completely aligned with the mandate from the department and aligned with the indicative budget that we were given. So it's been a very intense piece of work done quite rapidly in probably a much shorter period of time than we would have ever wished to have done. But we're sort of about 3/4 of the way through that piece of work. So Sean, over to you, please.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you, Teresa. So there is some slides which people can see up on the screen when we've shared. So very briefly, moving to the next slide and the slide after, please, Jen. So the purpose of what we're trying to achieve here is an alignment between the mandate, which is what we have to deliver for the value of £357 million, and the operating plan, which is the document that describes how we will deliver to that value. A lot of work has gone into the alignment of both of those documents, but also into the cost and value linked to that that sum of money, 357 million, and what is affordable across the range of services that Manx Care provides, commissioned through DHSC by supported by Treasury, to ensure that we are able to care for the island's population and meet all of its needs. Next slide, please. In principle, there are some risks associated with what we're doing, and some will be able to be offset through a cost management control. So looking at the way we spend our money and using it in the maximum possible way, reinvesting in some services. Some of these pressures will need to be funded, and we are in current negotiations with the Department of Health and Treasury on the additional funding that those items will require. And it is therefore hoped that by the end of the negotiating period, we will have removed any outstanding pressures. But if we haven't, then we will have to apply further controls within our budget to ensure we start and conclude the year appropriately funded. Next slide, please. The mandate priorities remain as they have done in previous years. There is no change to the mandate or the Manx Care Act Schedule 2 requirements in terms of the compliance and responsibilities for compliance. We are and have changed some of the outputs in the mandate to ensure that they're deliverable within the funding. And so standards that were in previous mandates have been amended to ensure that we are not unnecessarily placing Manx Care and its constituent parts under undue pressure. That said, there is a stretch to delivering the activity and delivering the care that is required. And we are really clear that we want, through the engagement process we've undertaken with the mandate and the operator, government, DHSC and Treasury, to be very clear on the limitations that are within that 357 million figure. But that's not to say that that openness and transparency is leading to potential harm or injury coming to patients. It will lead to constraints. It will lead to longer waits for access to some services. Moving to the next slide, please. Obviously, as part of our programme, there is an ongoing need to transform the delivery of care and the services that we're expected to deliver, and we are expecting further investment this year for the support of transformation services. We are continuing to drive services in the community, and that's really important. So changing the approach, lessening the demands on hospital care and driving as much care as we safely and possibly can into community services. Lots of work has already been undertaken in that, but further work needs to be undertaken, particularly around the development of the locality hubs, the digital activation. So really important to optimise the current systems whilst the Manx Care record comes online, which will give people access and information to support the care that they're doing. A better understanding of the workforce need across all of the services that we deliver, and a real drive to push clinical productivity through efficiency, and as the chair's already alluded to, through the tools, particularly in getting it right first time, the GIRFT model of delivery, using things like patient-initiated follow-up, so empowering patients to care for themselves rather than over-medicalising or clinically arranging for ongoing repeated care with a very high DNA wrote by people who don't see the value and need in attending hospital outpatient appointments. That, we hope, will help us in terms of the ask and what we need to deliver. Next slide, please. So as I've said, we're moving to a more community-focused model of care, clinically led. So hopefully we will see through the plan changes in the operations team, strong clinical leadership driving the services that we provide. We can't change the need to support urgent and emergency care. And the definitions of those things are people require help quickly. And so we need to be able to respond to that need. But what we can do is coordinate our urgent and emergency care response across the island rather than having individual silos or tubes of care that don't join together and unfortunately often end up in repeated use by a single person going through several points of contact. So streamlining that. We also need to sustain our important cancer care and our links with our English providers to ensure the best access, the most timely access for cancer care. And once we've done that, then the budget that's left supports the ongoing demands of our elective care. And there is no doubt that there will be an effect in elective care, but we hope through getting it right first time, the impact on actual patient contacts will be nil. And so we will be able to deliver the same level of activity in next year's financial budget, but it will not cost as much as it's cost to deliver this year through the productivity and efficiency changes that we're making from April. That will be a phased approach. So it won't happen for everybody immediately, but through the course of 12 months, we will grow and improve that. There are changes that you will see, that the public patients will see in further support with care in the community, further support around more care being provided in primary care, so the support of arrangements for patients with long-term chronic conditions being supported more in primary care. More efficient access to diagnostics, with diagnostics leading to treatment outcomes, and some outsourcing and insourcing of some activity to make services efficient. Next slide, please. We are going to have to provide further kind of financial controls. We've got the need to look at what workforce we need going forward, but we also may need to look at what workforce we no longer require and how we might need to action that. We do need to strengthen our off-island contracting and tertiary service provision to make sure that we're getting what's right for the island's population, and we get it right every time for the island's population and don't have unnecessary journeys occurring for the public. It's not what they want. They're telling us that through some of the information that we've received through some of the government conversations we've had, and it's not what our clinicians require. We do need to manage our suppliers, and there will be a new financial system being introduced in June, which we will hope make those controls much better. And finally, the next slide, please. So we are, as Teresa has suggested, we are well on the way with both of the documents, with the final readings of those documents happening in this week. I hope that we will be able to get the two documents to Manx Care board soon, and also to the DHSC board soon, with a view that there will be a further sharing with Tynwald and Council of Ministers a bit later this month. The hope is that the two documents will be able to be laid before Tynwald around about the 18th of March. I'd just like to thank everyone's contributions for the development of the document, if I may, Chair and Teresa. I think it's been an absolutely outstanding document. As Teresa has said, I've never done something in such a short space of time, but the engagement from clinical and managerial staff from the DHSC and Treasury in taking us to the stage we're at now has been incredible. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Teresa, anything you want to add? So open up questions and comments. Tim?
Thank you, Chair. In particular, well, first thing to say is really good to hear your emphasis on safety. I know that's really important for the public to hear, but that emphasis on safety remains and it's fundamental. And then in no particular order, I really welcome the focus on contracting. And I think that's something which we have had a deficit around because we are both the purchaser and the provider for a whole range of services. And I think that focus on contracting and managing supplies is really, really important. As you say, many of these things are what our community residents tell us they want anyway. Carer closer to home, care within the community. Not wishing to give too much away, I've been trapped elsewhere in an outpatient loop, which I find it really difficult to get out of. And that does happen. And I think it's really important that we focus on that and really focus on patients where they're able in terms of having more control over their pathway and the treatments that they have and where they receive them and how they receive them. So really welcome that. Also, really welcome your commendation of the whole of the executive team and further out in terms of the support that you've been given. I think that's really good for the board to hear that everybody is working on this and is assisting you. And that is reassuring for us as me as a board member. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you to Sean as well. Everybody's worked really, really hard over the last few months. And the key to this in terms of our patients and, you know, the people who live on this island is really understanding from end to end what your treatment is going to be. And it's done as efficiently and effectively with good safety and quality. And just a very quick example, you know, somebody with a respiratory long-term condition, instead of being in and out of a hospital bed, if we could efficiently make sure that that patient is out in the community, and we know they only come into the hospital when they absolutely have to, so we manage out in the community as much as we can. You know, take that from a patient who comes into ED via an ambulance. We know they need a stent in their coronary artery, and we get them out to the tertiary centre in an emergency. Making sure that is, people use the words efficiency and effective and productivity. What we mean by that is making the care safe, making it as a, if you make it more efficient, you'll make it safer. If you make it more effective, it'll be of better quality. If you have patients in the right place at the right time with the right treatment, that equals quality and safety. So I just wanted to raise that, Chair, in this public meeting, because this particular work is going to be so important going forward for the population. Thank you.
So thank you. So I reiterate my thanks to the team that put this together, and Sean, you for leading it and for driving it. That is the point of improvement directors, whoever they're appointed by and wherever they sit. You've not gone native. You sat neatly in that lily pad in the middle, which is incredibly helpful. It is challenging, but for me, it's the first time that we're able to not just look through the financial lens, but look at the consequences of the financial settlement, the mandate, the operating plan, and therefore what our clinicians day to day will be doing. This level of challenge is unique, I think, in my experience. But we have got clinical leaders. We saw 4 of them in red, who are absolutely, and it's really nice that they happen to be in this meeting with this. From the assurance perspective, what we will want to see coming through from each of the elements of this work as we move into next year is the operating model that sits under the plan, who's doing what, how it's going, and then where's that leadership sitting. And that will enable us to focus on the areas that need more support, not just take a sort of carte blanche approach, which I think for the public is really key. So thank you. Teresa.
Sorry, just to add a final point, because as you quite rightly point out, the communication and the messaging behind this, and make sure everybody understands the changes that are being made, both within our own staff, but actually the public really understand what's different, why it's different, but why it's also being done, because there's always against the backdrop of being high quality, being safe, being efficient, being effective.
And just to remind people, this is the first time Manx Care's board has signed off the mandate, the operating plan, and everything that goes with it. We've been given it before. So this joint working across all sorts of chasms and boundaries is really, really important for the future of the care that we give. So thank you, John. And onwards and upwards, because it's not, the timeline is very tight. Now we move on to the committee chair reports. In terms of exceptions, so first up, People Committee, that's on 7th of February.
So I've got a verbal report because it was only last week. So the issue really to raise here is around our concern about a real low rate of staff responding to the staff survey. And whilst we recognise that within the survey there was a number of comments about staff recognising improvements, we've still got a very, very low number of people responding. So the committee then received assurance on a number of other issues. My personal hobby horse of mandatory training, actually things are moving forward with regards to health and safety training, which we're really, really pleased to see. Still a lot more work to do. The people dashboard and the KPIs still need work, particularly around the ongoing data quality issues, but we are able to take out some more assurance from that dashboard, which is good. The pay update has already been commented on. Workforce and culture is later on our agenda. And then we had a really excellent paper delivered to us by a member of the communications team around the organisation's use of social media, and how we're making sure that we're doing that in an appropriate fashion, but also in a way that enables us to have meaningful engagement. And so we're going to be looking to create resources for a TikTok account, which will enable us to reach a very specific demographic around the kind of 18 to 35-year-olds. So really would like to thank Katie who brought that paper. It was really excellent. Thank you.
I'm quite glad I'm not in that demographic description. I can't use TikTok, but thank you. I think social media is something that we need to reflect on as a rule,
yeah,
as opposed to just something that we receive. D&I committee, Katie's not here, I think. As far as I'm aware, there was no exceptional requests raised in that particular meeting. Just the ongoing discussions around timing for Max Care record, which, as we know, the Department of Health has been supportive of. We're waiting for further feedback from their board, I think. Audit committee, Nigel.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Vicky. So may I just ask, Elaine, did we manage to get the papers out for audit and finance and purposes committee?
Well, you didn't get the assurance, but I sent them to you, but once you presented them.
Okay, so apologies for that. The meetings happened last week, so apologies you haven't had the papers, but you will get them. So audit first. Audit tends to strike fear into the hearts of any victims who are subject to audit, but it's a slightly different concept to the one that perhaps some of us know in the financial circles. So it's an assurance committee where we work very much hand in glove with government chaired services, with the government's internal audit division. And I have to say that I'm really, really pleased, and I feel that the relationship that our audit committee has developed with internal services is really very positive now. We're working well together. I think there's a lot of great mutual trust and respect between what goes on here and what they do. And I see this process very much as an improvement to quality. And that is the key thing. want to be sure that where we have identified actions to take, we are actually recircling around them and making sure we are doing what we think we're doing. And this is proving to, I think, be very useful indeed. And we can put various subjects into the ascendancy or descendancy, dependent upon their import. And we are very flexible in that regard, and we keep some subjects clear that we can focus on as the year goes by to do that very same thing. So I'm very pleased about that. We also taken a new step here in that we actually invited a care group to attend the audit committee this time around, and Integrated Cancer and Diagnostics came and gave us a presentation, and it was an extremely useful activity because one, I think we were delighted at the amount of internal audit scrutiny that is going on within that care group, but also it gave them a chance to tell us who could be perceived to be in an ivory tower. We're not, but it gave them a chance to tell us what they're doing and what their concerns were and what their fears were. And we were able to reassure and help and even lubricate those functions with that. And that's a trend that we're going to continue throughout this year. At each audit committee meeting, we'll be inviting a different care group to come and talk to us and share with us, and hopefully dispel some myths and dispel some concerns.
But Nigel, do you mind if I interject there? Just
Please do.
one amazing thing about the presentation from the care group is they found the exercise extremely beneficial for themselves. They admitted they had to dig into the weeds, didn't they?
Yep.
For the information. But it was nice to hear that they didn't just come to the committee to serve our purposes. The piece of work has absolutely served some of their purposes, and the interim manager of the service now has a much clearer vision and view of exactly the pressure points and the areas that need addressing, and is now also able to prioritise those audits as well.
Absolutely. So I thought this was a really good initiative in terms of quality and assurance that we can give to you as a board as to what's going on under the skin, so to speak. Despite some amazing efforts by some lovely clinicians, there are still some challenges in the area of clinical audit. And we know that, and we're on it, and certainly the medical director is cited on that.
Thank you. So I think the sort of learning organisation that drives my ethos, I think that's really important, that we're using our board structures to develop the rest of the organisation, not just ourselves. So I think that's really helpful to hear that you have a care group.
I think there's also an imperative there, Chair Wendy, in terms of the work that Sean and Pete have been doing on the operating plan, in terms of buy-in to the right kind of change and the right kind of practices. And I think that's a cultural issue which probably we need to think about a bit more.
Yes, I point you. Thank you. Comments? Do you want to continue on FP&C?
May I, while you've got me?
While we've got you.
Thank you. Well, FP&C last week as well. Clearly a lot of tension finances at the moment. We're all aware of that. I think discussions at FP&C were robust yet realistic. And we had some exposure to the operating plan and the mandate. The key takeaways for me was I was absolutely delighted to hear the word alignment used all the time. Alignment between Manx Care, alignment between the department, alignment between Treasury, that imperative that seems to perhaps have escaped us up until now. And also the idea of working smarter and not necessarily harder, I think is absolutely necessary. Sean was very robust with us and very direct with us, which I think we welcomed, and that message did go out. So it's clear that crisis and opportunity do go hand in hand. The train has left the station. We must all get on it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, and I think alignment, at the very least, let's start off aligned. Yeah, I know it sounds a bit trite, but I think, if you start off with not aligned, then you have nothing. So I think I'm not being reductive, but I think it's a really helpful word to use because it implies cooperation, mutual respect, and mutual understanding, and sort of binary place that we've found ourselves in other times. So I think really helpful. Thank you. And then QSC at the end of January, which I think you chaired in allowed to be absent. Kate, are there any issues to elevate in terms of exception reports?
I mean, I think that it was a good meeting. Just to reiterate, Sarah's a hobby horse of mandatory training. That's something that the board need to keep an eye on. But lots of really good ideas about how we might increase compliance there. Some good work being undertaken, led by Sheila, around water safety and how we meet some of our mandatory requirements in terms of the regulatory space there. So it's very much work in progress, but really great to see a good start on that. And clearly we had an in-depth discussion about the mitigating risks for financial recovery and how assurance had been sought in terms of making sure that those risks had really been scrutinised to the right level. And then finally, just the point around, which I'm sure will be picked up in the governance review, around how we make the integrated performance report more useful for board members, potentially more information, less data, and that sort of approach. So that's the only things to raise, really.
Thank you, Kate, and thank you for chairing. We will make Tim pay the price for that in due course. But I think your point around mandatory training plays into the cultural piece that we're all engaged in. And again, it's about making it easy, but also pointing out how useful it is. You know, I can't tell you how many times I've had to go on, you know, turning courses, whatever it might be, of no use to me in my present role, but actually useful when I was doing something else. So we need to be much slicker about what we require in mandatory training and what our tolerance is when it's not useful to the individual. We've all been through endless fire lectures and stuff that, you know, unless you get to play with the fire extinguisher, who's going to go? So I'm really keen, Helen, that it is one of our sort of cornerstones of what we offer to our staff. I hate the term mandatory training, I really do. But what's the offer to our staff, and why do we require them to do this? So, thank you. Any other comments on the committees? No. So I'm conscious I'm mostly looking at the stick next, so I'll just make sure I turn and look at the side of the table. So we moving on to one of the key elements in our patient safety strategy, the Guardian for Safe Working. I think you've got a verbal update on this for us, Marina.
Yes, I'm really sorry that our Guardian of Safe Working is not able to join us. This is his paper that he prepared. Dr. Vijay Angasamy, who's been the Guardian of Safe Working since 2016. As we have mentioned previously, there was an issue with the junior doctors. He is responsible to make sure that the FY1 doctors, the internal medicine trainees and the staff doctors are working within their contracted hours. And unfortunately, this year there were 20 breaches, of which 18 of them were due to the fact that the doctors were working extra hours and not able to take their breaks. But there were 2 doctors who basically were not able to take their leave or get to their exams. These issues were escalated to Health Education Northwest, and we had a visit, and it was clear that we had a fundamental issue in medicine whereby we did not have enough doctors to do the rota so that working hours could be respected and doctors could get on their training. The exec took an immediate decision. Both Teresa and myself attended the meeting, and we increased the number of staff on the medicine rota. And this was really well accepted and appreciated by the doctors. And I do have to say that they really appreciated the support that they got from their consultants in medicine in supporting this. And I hope we won't have any more of these breaches in the future going forward. But this very much relies on a really good workforce plan in medicine that makes sure that those duty rotas are filled with adequate number of people, or else we are likely to enter into the situation again. That's a summary. The paper is there to be read. It's very, very well presented. Teresa, from our meetings with the North West, have I missed anything that you want to add?
Don't think so, Marina. I think I would just add that it's really positive to report that there's been no exceptions reported during January. So the immediate interventions and the immediate additional resource we placed has alleviated the immediate problems. We'd obviously, we sort of knew we had some issues, so we'd already commissioned a workforce planning review of medicine in, I think, November it was, through MIA. We've just got that back now, which is sort of supporting actually that we were right to put that additional investment in December. And obviously what we are going to need on a sustainable footing. That has been sort of sensor checked through the work Sean is doing on the revised operating plan. But I think it's encouraging. It's encouraging that we're getting these reports now to board, and that we've got that connectivity between the Guardian and Safe Working, that we're able to understand our exception reports and act upon them accordingly. But good, and I have written back to Professor Baker at the end of last week, just giving him an update.
Thank you. Can I just ask, so this is the annual review, where does the Guardian Safe Working regularly report? Is that through quality or people? Quality. Sorry, just wait.
So unfortunately, the Guardian of Safe Working hasn't been reporting through the system, and this is something we picked up through this review, and this is the first report that has come through the Manx Care Board. He thought he had to report to the Director of Postgraduate Education, but we have solved all that misunderstanding. This is the first report, and you should get a quarterly report through to the boards.
So I think it's unacceptable that people's careers are interrupted by not being able to sit exams that they have no doubt paid for, which I think we're paying them for that. These are very junior doctors. I am interested in the concept of putting more doctors into rotas. About 100 years ago, I developed a hospital at night. I led the work on working time directive and training with Sir John Temple. And I think we need to think differently. As a very small system, it's going to be extremely difficult to sustain the education during the day that young doctors require to meet their career milestones with the large number of doctors there are in those specialties. So we need to start, as long as we're safe now, this is a starting point for new ways of working, new ways of thinking.
Yes.
And I think it's in Derby where they've got a mixture of professionals on a number of rotas very successfully. I think it was Sir Stephen Moss when he was there, led that work. There's a whole area that we self-invest in someone that graduated from medical school 3 months ago. So I think we've really got to do that. I've met the foundation doctors. They are genuinely thrilled to work here. They enjoy it. But I think there's more that we should be doing and thinking about the future sustainability of that junior doctor grade, resident grade, as we now call it. So thank you. I look forward to hearing that. And I think, please, Marina, can you make sure that when we look at the detailed outcomes for the governance review, this appears somewhere in the where the reports go, because it can't just be to board. There's got to be a scrutiny at committee level for
Yes.
Tim.
That was my point. More than happy for it to come to QSE, but it needs to go through the committee process. And QSE hasn't seen any of these reports, and there haven't been any reports previously. I have to say that because this doesn't have any in the background, there were quite a number of areas I didn't quite understand from this report, because it doesn't say indeed what people were complying with. So it's hard to know whether there's compliance or not compliance, and that 18 out of 20 reports were submitted where doctors were working extra hours, but it doesn't say what the hours are they should be working. So it just needs some context.
It's the real challenge. It's 48 hours.
Well, that's what I
over 6 months average. It's a really complicated
So I think it does need the scrutiny of a committee which can spend some time looking at that some time looking at the detail in the background to give the board assurance. And that's not to say that the report shouldn't come to the board, but I think it
No,
needs to go to a
absolutely.
committee as well.
But I agree with the detailed what needs to be done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nigel, then Oliver, other one.
Thank you, Wendy. I just think this is just such a great opportunity again, where we've found something that perhaps has slipped through the cracks, but it's just a great opportunity. We had a lovely presentation about 2 years ago from Adrian Dashfield about the successes we were having with young doctors. And this is exactly what we want. We want people banging on the doors to get in, not us dragging them over here. And this is where we should be celebrating and really making a feature of it, I think.
I agree. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, and I think just by highlighting it here, I think this is a very good advertisement for board doctors coming over to work in Manx care, because it's something that, you know, we take seriously. I think it would be real helpful also in terms of context to know, is based on an organisation of this size, is 20 a high number, is 20 a low number? Benchmarking against other similar areas would be really helpful to know, so that we know how well we're doing.
I agree. It was a big piece of work done in the medical workforce space, I think, so we're looking at home as well. Right, any other comments on this? But thank you for the assurance that we've sorted it out. And then we have a verbal update on the people culture engagement. Of course, Helen hasn't yet started. So it's easier to tell us where we are with.
Yeah, we have covered up a lot of the issues. So obviously, positive progress we have made on pay, and the only group outstanding is the Public Services Commission, which obviously we don't have a direct role in negotiating, and that's still in dispute for 24-25. Just a reminder that it is the Care Awards this Thursday. And I always like to stress this, but the Care Awards is able to happen purely for the generosity of the sponsors who enable that event to be funded. It's a lovely evening. We've slightly changed the format this year in that we have invited many of the charities who we work really closely with all year, and who fund the extra developments that the NHS funding just doesn't reach. So these are the added extras which really make a huge difference to patient care. Just coming back to the staff survey. So this is the second time the organisation has done an all staff survey. And as Sarah said, you know, we are concerned about sort of the low response rate at 23%. There have been some sort of positive movements on a number of the indicators. And I think what's probably encouraging is that 85% of the actions that have resulted from this survey are already captured in our people, culture and engagement strategy, which was refreshed last year and signed off at the board in October. Still huge amounts of work to do. But as always, it's a helpful continued baseline and allows us to really focus our efforts. We had committed, I think the People Committee had committed to have the staff survey published next week, and we are going to meet that timescale. And there's a rolling programme of communication through both March, April and May. The suggestion is we might not always do an annual survey, but have quarterly check-ins to make sure that the actions that we have in place in response to the survey, we are seeing positive progress against those areas. And that feels a more sensible way forward. As I say, I caught up with the workforce and culture lead at the start of the week. And their focus, which is really helpful for us, is to really motor on that workforce planning piece, which is so critically important to the new operating plan. So yes, but we have to acknowledge that the workforce and culture team who have been supporting us for the last few years, they're in their last year of funding. So it's really important that we get some of this really critical work across the line. But I think that's all I wanted to say on the people, culture and engagement subject. Yeah.
I just think it's should be a red light for the board that there was a 23% level of return. And it's just not a normal, it's just not normal for organisations. If organisations outside of here were getting that kind of a kickback from their staff, they would want to know what was going on. And I just think it's extremely worrying. I know that we haven't historically used external survey organisations as the NHS does, but maybe Picker or I just use that because that's what I've come across in the past. But maybe there are organisations which can help us in terms of the survey itself. And I have no idea whether it's the survey, whether it's because it's coming at a certain time, whether it's because it's not being done by an independent organisation, whether it's because it's the time of year or whatever. But maybe we do need to have some external assistance. And I think to stop doing it because we're getting a low level or to do something different, it's really just not acceptable.
Sarah?
I mean, that was the discussion that we had at People Committee. And if you compare the response rate of Manx Care to the response rate of NHS organisations in England, Scotland and Wales, it is indeed incredibly low. If you compare the response rate of Manx Care to other government departments on Ireland, it is incredibly high. So there is clearly a culture on Ireland of not really responding to organised surveys. And this board knows all too well that the BMA get a hefty response from consultants and people saying that they're consultants. So there is a piece of work to be done, Tim. You're right to draw it to our attention around how do we create a safe environment where our staff want to tell us what's going on. And I think it isn't about necessarily stopping the annual survey. It might be about doing something on top of it. The committee definitely did not make the decision to stop. It made a commitment or a request of execs to look at other ways of helping us hear from staff. I can't remember the percentage of the Isle of Man government survey, but it was substantially lower in single figures and is no longer in existence. So we're not giving up. We will find an alternative way, but there's clearly an issue, and an issue that the committee recorded, hence the escalation to the board.
So I have declared interest. I was on the Picker Institute board for a while, relatively recently, and I do remember quite detailed conversations about the sort of evidence base for improving survey response rates. But the message that stuck with me as a non-statistician is if you aren't seen to respond to the survey as an organisation, your rates don't go up. And that's the biggest thing that we can do is respond. And that's coordinated board level, every clinical leader level. And I think Oliver, it will play into the restructure of the new service groups. So, what's the target for each clinical service group? How will they learn what their staff want if they don't use this survey? So I think it may well be worth a conversation with someone like Picker, and they are internationally respected, and they're not expensive. But I do think we need to have a refocus, because the pace of change, the challenge that we're putting out there for our staff is not going to change in any way at all. It's going to get, if anything, more visible to them. And we can't deliver any of the work that we've seen around the operating model without them being engaged. My sense is that it's, from talking to staff, it's not that they don't want to fill it in, it just sort of passes them by. Which I may be wrong, but just in the groups I've met, it's like they don't see it as an important tool. And then the piece of work that we need to think about how we do. Teresa.
And just to come back on the regularity of the report, yes, a decision hasn't been made. I think the conclusion that we came to was, when the report is published in March and you're starting to run the survey in September, you're not able to demonstrate as much progress as you would like. So actually, by like doing the big survey on every 2 years, and by demonstrating you've been able to make really good progress and can evidence that by the quarterly pulse checks, felt, a better way of trying to demonstrate, because I think it was the discussion at People Committee that actually is the reason people aren't responding. We have to sort of keep providing the messages around it is confidential. But actually, if they're not seeing enough progress from the previous survey, there'll be, a bit of apathy around responding to it again, particularly when what we can see is that all of the things that have been said are already in our action plans and we're already moving forward. So I think it's really important we demonstrate some clear progress against the actions that we've already got in train.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Any other comments? So moving on to FP&D report, December management accounts. Becky?
Thank you, Chair. So you'll have December's accounts in your pack. So I'm just going to pick out some of the salient points and then I'm going to take questions. So you'll see that the forecast position has remained broadly steady since last month, with a forecast deficit of 14.6 million. We have so far this year on the SIP delivered £8.6 million of shared savings, and we're broadly on track to deliver the forecast 11.7 million of savings. We, in terms of our back to balance plan, which has gone through various iterations in this year, we originally set out 14.3 million of initiatives. 6.5 million of those have now delivered and have materialised into the forecast. So part of that will have a little bit of crossover in terms of the SIP performance. So when you put those two things together, we're on track to deliver close to £15.5 million of cash out savings in this year, which has helped to mitigate the position. Wanted also to draw out that the current trajectory around agency spend continues to be positive. Our year-to-date spend on agency is £3.9 million less than it was